on to read the poem together, I'd like to talk a little bit about this issue because it's my last as editor of Modern Poetry and Translation, and in many ways it's the one which is closest to my heart because I am a translator from Russian, and we've chosen to make it a Russian-Ukrainian issue, and we did that absolutely deliberately. It was a way of talking about differences and similarities, and also a way of registering protest against what is currently happening. So I think that we'll probably talk about that as well a little bit later. So I won't say too much now, but I would really be delighted if you wanted to buy a copy at the end and read some of the poetry in it. It's all rather amazing poetry and incredibly prescient and important. The issue itself is also supported by the Case Foundation. We're really grateful for their support. And Maria's trip to London is supported by the Case Foundation, and Maria is also reading in Oxford as part of the launch of the Modern Poetry and Translation. I think what we'll do is we'll just go straight into the performance of the War, the Beasts and the Animals. But before we do, I just wanted to ask how many people here are Russian speaking. Would you mind lifting your hand if you're Russian speaking? The reason I'm asking is because what we decided to do is to read this poem, which is it's a long poem, but in order to read it together, we're going to read most of it in English and Russian, but some short parts we'll read in Russian and other short parts we'll only read in English. I hope in this it won't make too much difference if you don't understand every little bit of it, because it is what it builds up to as a whole that's important. But it is in MPT, so if there are bits that you'd like to go back to, then please grab a copy. So, without further ado, Maria Stepanova, The War of the Beasts and the Animals.
Maybe we could place them back just so
Look, the spirits have gathered at your bedside, speaking in Lethean tongues. Hushabye, so flesh and fine, for what do you long?
Я улыбнулась. Он мне сказал: Марусь, крепче держись, Марусь. И мы полетели.
I smiled. He said, Marusya, Marusya, hold on tight. And down we went. November, the cruelest month, the hoarsest mouth, driving from the dead clay, peasants forged to the field, cows, curs, leaving over their dead body, the post bag snagged in the stream, the tin spoon, the quick stream slipping, the quick silver slip sliding away to the estuary.
Ноябрь, беспощадный месяц несытый, гонит из мертвой глины крестьян к земле прикрепленных, собак и коров, полегших костьми, затонувшую почту, железную ложку, ручьи, несущие к устью ртутное серебро. Ехал на ярмарку ухарь, ямщик в степи замерзал, помещик пивпав застрелился, вагон офицера увез.
This little piggy went to market, and this little piggy goes to death, and the landowner put a gun to his head, and a black car came for the officer.
Вышла из вязкой воды, из верхнего теплого слоя майскую ночью утопленница, из-за дела взялась, быстро все опрокинула, сырым босиком натоптала, черным телом светила, белой сорочкой мела.
Mother, Mother, is that you? Alyosha, I don't rightly know.
Ласточка, ласточка, та улетела, мой друг.
Such high-minded intercourse topples and must fall at last, a plague of both your ivy-clad turrets, waterside folly.
Утренняя почта сообщает наше, что ковер жениху не ткать, траву не мять, пароль поменять, поминать покойную мать, не ходить за личинку.
Marcia learns on breakfast TV her petticoat was yellow and her lily cap was green, till apples grow on an orange tree. Breaches of password security. If I were drowned in the deepest sea, thus sung the maid down in the valley.
Российский актер Михаил Пореченков приминает к боку тепленький автомат, музыкальную шкатулку новейшего поколения, словно спешит обрасти косматым руном и узкое море ему уже поколений.
Russian actor Mikhail Porеченков fingers his warm little rifle like the latest novelty music box, like he's desperate to grow his own golden fleece and the narrow waters already round his knees.
Святослав в Акуеве звон тот слышал.
And Tom Thumb bid them listen who were of the lands of Soros and Korsun. Black night brings long strings, foot, 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 slogging all the millers of God. Hi-ho, hi-ho, and off they go to civil war.
Слева кудри токоля, справа генерала, на груди парикария, челка либерала, щеки твои алые, очи голубые, разговоры малые, доводы любые. Небо не так синее, как глаза твои, кантария синие. Спой мне, моя милая, что-нибудь из Россини, арию графини с радио России.
Thou art the armourer of the heart. Sing me a ditty, something from Rossini, Rosina perhaps, like on Radio Rossiya. As in a chariot race, the chosen one, glistening like quartz in his roaring metal carapace, whips this way along the course, but the chariot is cleverer, throwing up stones, crashes the barrier and crushes the marrow from bones. So, setting out rooks and queens in their checkered chambers, culture leads fear down the gauntlet of human nature, stinking of laurel wreaths, steeped in a boiling pan, to where there's a lively trade in the living unit of man.
Вспомни о том, как в усадьбе родной в 200-летней аллее кости лежат под березинкой, отсвечивая и голея. Люба в рассеянии будь, подруги старикочек подруга, мало от нас было порока, мы не поддержали друг друга. Снова мы в комнатке детской лежим спеленаты туго.
Sing to me of how, on an ancient alley, on your family's estate, the weathered bones lay bleached and scattered under a birch tree. Quietly they chattered. There was no point to us. We didn't lend each other our hands. Like babes, we lay in the nursery in our swaddling bands.
Как бы я под ним кончала, говорит одна, а я все слышу, и вторая говорила, не молчала.
Fruits of the curbside reads the jar label. From whatever takes root in the stony rubbish, embers, sawdust, scorched wood, suspended in sweet amber sugar, cockerel-shaped lollies for the day of the dead. When I'm off to market or when I'm coming home, I always remember what she said back then.
Нога на ногу пошла войною, какая сверху. Нога ноге обещала, я тебя сверху.
One leg across the other. Who goes on top? One leg bows to the other. I'll top you. When we seize all the banks, redistribute the fruits of our labour and the engines in all the tanks flooded with rainwater, then we'll help the poor earth shake the wig from her head, erect a polytunnel instead with the multiplication of those poles, cold and dead. And the south will come knocking at our ears, pears will droop in the heat, gleaming bulbous pears, swollen globular fruit, and the pizza deliveries well oiled, and the truth wears at our heart, for the rapid soil shall bring forth its own bard.
Нелепо ли, граждане, старыми словесы начати, молчати?
Were it not seemly, citizens, to begin in ancient diction to stay silent.
Но я умел бы жить и умереть в Париже, когда бы не было чего-нибудь поближе. Москва твоей земли, Китай твоей воды и Танганьика этих маленьких деревьев, где всходы прячутся, когда заходит речь.
Here, at the crossroads of two legs, vast, cat-footed, the un-Russian god rose, the puddles reflected.
И козы легкие навстречу нам бегут, в тенях березовых раскроенного ситца. Голубчик мой прям, не время ли колоситься, и гаист тебе не гуд? Здесь крапчатой коре не видно соответствий, здесь розовой заре порой народных бедствий не говорят остынь, но требуют огня. Здесь ямбы прыгают, пока четырехстопы, но спотыкаются, обулые глаголы и падают далеко от Европы обиженные шкурки коня.
Children in the yard play at being Olympian gods and then at Gestapo interrogation. To be honest, it's much the same. I had a dream, night in its nuptial attire, the cornfield, the melon's swelling belly. Under the stars, the machine gunner sings to the machine gun, swaddled, cradled at his breast. Sleep, my sunflower, sleep, my poppy. Soon the warm sun will come back from the south, and there'll be new life in the pedestrian subway, playing on the half-dismembered harmony, and the soldiers gather the light ash in pots.
Как мало земли спаслось на груди земли, отойми уголок одеяла, грелку поправь, умерь испарину, дай воде дотянуться, делай глубокий вдох, ров в ров, ровно, коровно.
Deep in draft, ditch after dug out, dogged, in-drafted. Say the word that don't belong, put it on and march along. Forget the old and step anew, and the word will march with you.
Чужое слово, как башмак, без выбора обуй, и позабыв свой старый шаг, оно пойдет с тобой. Оно ссыхает сугу, едва произнести, как лягушачий голый труп под солнцем на пути. Оно створожится во рту, покуда на замке, и дай-ка я его утру. И вот оно в платке, и его, и его, и тягостное «М» не полузначит ничего. Они умрут совсем, раскинув синие крыла под тяжестью небес. Орел плывет, как камбала, переплывая лес, уже без алфавиты.
That word, it curls up and dies at your lip as it emerges. Like the spread-eagled toad, it lies in the heat on the verges. It clots sticky in the mouth, froths, issues. Here, let me wipe it out. It's in the tissue. Ugh, with it, and gagging, They don't half mean anything. When they die, they're gone. Blue wings thrown wide under the weight of the sky, the eagle floats over the forest, undulating in the air like a place divested of alphabet. On the 22nd of June, at 4 o'clock on the dot, I won't be listening to anything, I'll have my eyes shut.
22 июня, ровно в 4 часа, я ничего не буду слушать, я закрою все свои глаза, и я зарою вражьи голоса, и не включу программу «Время». И если кто придет, то я не в теме. Я птичка, я нейтральная полоса.
I'll bury the foreign broadcast. It's the news, but I won't lift a hand. If anyone comes, I'm out of the loop. I'm the sparrow. I'm no man's land. The home fires are burning low. Be still, my heart, beat slow. Don't spend the kerosene. Douse the fire. It won't end as I desire.
Эхо, бессонная нимфа, скиталась по брегу Пинея. Сотня юных бойцов на поля поскакала в дозор.
Strongly it bears us along in swelling and limitless billows, 100 young warriors scrambling to form the watch.
Вдали у реки засверкали штыки и белые комья рубак. Одни полководцы пошли на других с папироской смертельной в зубах. Психическая атака, барабанный бой, Анка у пулемета возносится над собой.
Birds singing in the sycamore tree. Major Petrov fucks Major Div.
В густых карманах пахотной земли.
That night, over the field of battle, the nachtigall tells the nachtigall, nighting gasps in disbelief, and in neighbouring places, bird tells bird, passing from beak to beak like a dead frog, the exact science, earth's caesura, between the stains of the sighted, between one mottled zone of streetlights warmed by proximate life and its answering beam, the sightlessness of moss on boughs, anxious flight, armoured vehicles, lenses aimed at movement.
Нету разницы между первой и второй, отечественной и отечественной, великой и тихой, атлантической, мировой. Все равно они падают на единственной, на гражданской, где заря в зале копошится, извлекает наконечники копий. Вась, а Вась, простите, Лёш, а Лёш, огоньку бы, говорит, убитому убитый, убитый, говорит, убивцу.
No difference between first and second, patriotic or patriotic, great or Pacific, Atlantic, world, all the same they fall to the civil, where sunrise quivers in the cinders, draws out the spear tips. Mate, hey, mate, get a light, says the dead to the dead, says the killed to the killer.
Цветок умирает под кожей стекла, роток почернел и культя затекла. Земля за убитых, она сохранит их и в должное время представит тела. Разумные звери выходят на суд, свидетельский ящик, прозрачный сосуд. Там темно и текло, дорожка намокла, и видно, как соку щенята сосут. Судья поднимает глаза с полировки на низкую лампу дневного огня, берет распечатки, ориентировки и спросит присяжных, прощать ли меня. И не прерывая уже разговора, вчерашние братья выходят из сбора в обугленных шкурах, в болотной грязи, садятся в телегу, а ну-ка вези туда, где поляна палатку держала, стянули тропу травянистые жало и держат, как стропы, дорогу назад, чтоб даже надежду она не рожала. А как оправдаться? Язык едока покажет отчетливый след молока, древесные кольца покажет бумага, следы топора и слова дурака про Магна и Магу.
Magna Imago. The acacia has long blossomed, the army is long gone. Mellow declamation has spread its wings and flown. Ride a cock horse to wherever the cross, and rip out the stuffing and give it a toss, and freedom needs stripping. Stay standing, lads, as long as you can. Bust the joint, smash the game. One of our gang will crouch in a hole wherever we are and swig champagne. Gypsies dead, hussars defunct. Dusk now falls, colour shrunk. Pitter-patter across the heart, sputter, spatter on the tablecloth. Voices raised in lament, which once were full of joy.
Кто там едет по Васильевскому спуску к храму Василия Блаженного? Страны, рады, грады наряжены.
Who is that riding onto Red Square towards St Basil's Cathedral? Countries rejoice, cities jubilant.
На всей моей территории наступает пятиминутка истории. Лисицы брешут на заградительные отряды.
Across my territory begins 2 minutes history. Vixens bark at the crimson shields.
Комариный стон заглушает звон колокольни.
Mosquitoes' drone drowns out the pealing of bells.
Зайцы-русаки на всех избирательных участках отдают солидарный голос.
Russian hares in all the polling stations. The country has spoken.
Тоже и персьи мухи, от земли оторвавшись, осуществляя тактическое кружение.
And then the midges, daring themselves from flesh, rotate tactically overhead.
Кто ж не хочет тихого дона попить из дедовой кружки и вернуться назад, утираясь, и на даче мангал разводить, посыпая окрошку укропом, засыпая землей.
Who wouldn't want to be drinking the quiet dawn from grandfather's wooden cup, going back in time, rub your eyes, put kebabs on the fire, reclaim those words, sprinkle them on soup, sprinkle earth. Blas the volunteer, a fortnight dead, forgot the ruble rate at what the sparrows said and where he was from. A current of explosive air held his bones in embrace. As he flew, the years passed from him, chubby-cheeked, babbling. Rusky or Ukrainian, oh you, whoever you are, in this neglected crossing place, consider Vlas. Vlas was nicer than you.
Влас, доброволец, 2 недели как мертвый, забыл курс рубля, и что воробьи говорили, и откуда он сам. Взрывная волна взяла его кости в объятия. Пока он летел, годы сползали с него, обнажая детские щеки, приборматывая. Ватник или укроп, кто бы ты ни был, на этом заброшенном переезде вспомни о Власе. Влас был тебя, милей. Мы не немцы, не мы немцы, шерстью крыты их младенцы, не люди мы, их становья, мы не немцы, цыкать кровью.
We know German. We know German. On our offspring down grew. No man, we not become. We know German rage blood.
Мы не рыбы, рыбы не мы, с ними можно делать смены. Мы не вещи, не черепья, не скворечни, не черешня.
No fish we, fish now dumb. Fish we can do deal with. No thing we, no skull we, no house bird, no cherry tree.
Мы не мы, ты, мы не мы же в роще мирты сплю и вижу за межами языками, медвежами, музыками.
We know, we, you, we know, we. In the myrtle grove I sleep and see, beyond, behind, spoke and word, rush and bear, melodies.
Мы не азы, мы не сразу.
We know a, not straight away.
Человеческое тело не расходится, как мыло в напомаженной воде. Оно никогда не бывает было. Оно всегда сейчас и где. Оно светимо сквозь валежник. Его уничтожить мудрено. Оно пробьется оно пробьется, как подснежник, сквозь углеродное пятно. и все, что в нем едва существовало, но изнывало в заперти, рванется в черные провалы, чтобы опять произойти. Новая жизнь восходит, когда не чаешь, знать не можешь, чем ее повстречаешь.
They travelled a long time, dumbstruck, still standing trees, not earth, and earth pressed close. Builders' yards, morgues, fly tips, sky pale white, blue hills, sky warmed, up and down the road and the road.
Пешелань, чернуха, суроватика, чуварлейка, утка, погибелка, ужива.
Swallet, grin, droop, spiny broom, steep, stonecrop, come.
И упрямая речка, водопрь, водою не сытый, устыжающая холмы совершенной формы.
They called the hills mounts, and we walked on the mount. We strolled in ornamental gardens, reflected in the long shanks of birch. We gazed in the heavenly blue. We noticed that populousness is bluer, roofs, fences, cars, heavy colours, like a waterproof tarp.
Никто из нашей фамилии не бывал в этих землях с 1916 года. Уже неведомые воды ослепительными платками стелются широко, не возражая, не превращая, не урожая, не прекращая.
No one from our family has been in these lands since 1916. Glare of white handkerchiefs spread white on the uncharted waters. Non-opposing, non-metamorphosing, non-harvest table, non-stop able. Life, you are a gash in need of stitching. Death, you are a crust that yearns for filling.
Жизнь, ты прореха, нуждающаяся в починке. Смерть, ты тесто, стосковавшееся по начинке. Те, кто держит во рту, сперва осторожно, головы с глазами. Те, кто трогал в уме газету, как мама учила не никогда, и руки отмой. Те, кто рвут на лету, переносят из дома в дом, размазывают по стеклам. Тупорылое тело пробуют установить на колеса и катить, наставляя жерло, поплевывая в направлении те и эти, но в большей степени эти. Для них самобранкою новобранцы раскидывают зеленые руки, им ложатся в ноги тупыми березовыми стволами, чтобы понравиться карме, по желанию жили, по велению баяна, под побудку аккордеона и о голоса детей, поющих, где было купол, в нечистом поле, в окружении хлебов и богов.
Yes, them and these two, but actually more these. For them, conscripts spread their green arms wide, like a tablecloth plentifully spread, lie heaped at their feet like birch logs, to please the Valkyries at the harpies' heart's desire, to the Byron's thrum, the accordion's reveille, and oh, those children's voices, singing where once there was a dome, in the soiled field, surrounded by corn and scarecrows. Not on the earth, but above or below, war's deep grunt, producing slimy rivers of sweat. Its hand feels for the gut, and we stagger, carry ourselves through the darkness. And Mother Demeter, mithering in the muck and anguish of the fields, hears from below, Mother fuck, yet the sky might be brightening, or so it feels. And Mother Hecate comes out for a smoke from the back street, from the foul black streets, from the pecking fowl, the puddles of spilt milk. The earth is lying like a kit bag behind enemy lines. Give it tongue. Mother Mary hurries, but hasn't yet come.
Не на земле, а над или под, Глухая война идет, она смазной источает пот и трогает за живот. И мы шарахаемся, себя в темноте неся. И мать Диметра выходит мять ногами тугу полей, и сверху слышится вашу мать, а снизу кажется чуть белей. И мать Геката наперекор выходит из тупика, от черных улиц, от черных кур, из луж разбитого молока. Земля лежит вещевым мешком невзятого языка, и мать Мария бежит пешком, но нет ее здесь пока.
In the winged spirit, the still small voice of cold, she who cradles Leviathan in her hands like the infant, and she who rises above the rye, all are present for this as it happens. They watch, they steadily, unspeaking.
В духе горни, в голосе хлада тонко, та, что Левиафана берет на ручки, как маленького ребенка, и та, что идет по ржи, присутствует при этом происходящем, смотрят, не отводя, молча. Как зреет лед в хранилищах и слеза в слезницах, как почва пробует первый вес дождя, как рассыпают топки мороза дымящиеся смертные кирпичи. В общежитии драка разворачивается, как роза. Женщины в сланцах стоят сусликами, и сама не кричит. Как весною в военкоматах смотрят спины, трогают у ключиц, выбирают коротконогих, жилистых и косматых под приглядом врачиц.
As the ice in the ice house and the tear in the bottle come of age, as the soil tastes the first weight of the rain, as the ice stoves send out blocks of smoking death, in the big brother house a fight opens like a flower. Women in flip-flops, fixated, shut the fuck up, why don't spring in the recruiting office, knee-jerk, stethoscope down the spine, picking out the shaggy, the short-legged, the sinewy under matron's watchful eye. How the thick plaits of herring stream away, the lines of tanks on bridges flash in the sun. A waiter's flourish reveals a pitiful morsel, shivering, drizzled in salt, underdone. And over there is everything that I kiss from afar, that I love to smithereens, all of it, still shouting Alleluia, but no respite from the shameful dream.
Как уходят под воду сплоченные косы сельди, танковые части поблескивают на мостах, вносят на блюде заплатку снеди, стынущую в соляных цветах. Там и все, что я мысленно целую, любимая до красна, все способное сказать аллилуйя, не прерывая стыдного сна. Змееве и все бездны, солдатики у ворот, ярусы небесные, няня Лена и ее огород, снег, яко волна, и мгла, яко пепел, горло, как пена, и ноги, как вода, сердце, продетое в одну из петель, яко пуговица, знающая куда, избави нас от десницы неправды.
Serpents and all deeps, tin soldiers at the city walls, all the ranks of angels, Nanny Liana digging vegetables, snow like wool and hoarfrost like ashes, throat like spindrift, legs like a foal, heart thrust through the noose like a button through a buttonhole. Save us from the right hand of falsehood. A memory won't save us, lies in the ashes biting its own tail. He taketh not pleasure in the legs of a man or the strength of a horse.
Воспонимание не спасает, лежит по прахе, собственный хвост кусает, не в лыстях мужеских, не в силе констей. Это как портной вместо рубашки смирительной, которая с детства исполниться хочет и просится из полотна, шьет по картинке, краит по косой и платье не жмет, но щекочет. Это как суд идет с железной тележкой по длинному больничному коридору, тугие раздает свертки, тяжеленькие, живучие приговоры, по 3 с пуповиной. Это как в замешательстве выплюнешь слово с крючком, а оно уже в теле засело или в теле товарища, родной человек о губе. Вот и нитка запляшет, рыба рыбу поймала. Это так, ком под сугробом, ничего не значит. Надпись на табличке, никого не видит. Надпись на камне, ничего. Читаем, его нет, но здесь.
Like a court, proceeding down the long hospital corridor with a heavy trolley, handing out the tightly wrapped packages, the little living weights and verdicts. 3 per court, ladies. Like when in a moment's confusion you spit out a barbed word and it lodges in a tree body, or the body of a comrade, or a friendlip, and the line goes taut. Fish hooks a fish. Like a mound under a snowdrift means nothing. Writing on a tomb sees no one. Writing on a stone, nothing. We read it not, but it is. I suspect that probably you have more questions than answers after that reading, and you might like to perhaps ask some questions, or we might just have a little discussion. So I thought perhaps I would, or perhaps we sit down and you have to stop.
In 2015, when the war in Ukraine was at its peak, after the plane crash, after a very special thing I was witnessing during this summer, but especially after a certain week, I was back from a certain trip after the plane crashed, and I couldn't recognize the city I'm living in for my lifetime, because it was looking like a seaside town, like something happily hot, ready for eating, ready for enjoying our lifetimes. It didn't remind you of anything connected to the war. It seemed that it was a lazy, happy capital of a peaceful country somewhere, in a kingdom by the sea. And people were standing, at the streetways, at the boardwalks, by the pubs, by the cafes, drinking beer, enjoying themselves. And it seemed to me I'm witnessing someone else's dream, and I couldn't wake anyone up, or even myself. And after that I just had to finish this poem that existed only in scraps and drafts, but then it somehow found its ending. I guess that's it.
And it's an epic poem, and we had a seminar about poetry and revolution in Bristol a couple of days ago, and there was a discussion about epic as a precursor to colonisation in history, in historical epic. Yours is almost the reverse, and I wondered if you wanted to... Lyricizing the epical genre, you mean? Generally, that the epic is some precursor to imperialist activity or colonisation, whereas yours seems like the inverse.
Well, if my stuff is epic, it's an epic split into pieces. That's why the title of the book is Spolia, which means a way of building something using as a constructive part of the new project some bits and pieces of the previous project. Usually has a tragic history, and of course any story and any history has a tragedy as a preface, but still. The Russian language is being split into pieces right now, as well as the Russian mind and the Russian, what might be called sensibility. And what I was trying to do, together with just reflecting the things that are going on, is to give it a momentary snapshot, which has maybe a right to exist as a way of, well, if a language may have a transitional kind of being, it's a language in transit, on the move, as you may put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really struck me that, because and that particularly was important for the translation, because I was saying to Marsha earlier today that if I tried to translate this poem 2 years ago, it would have been much harder, but we've come a long way in the last 2 years in Britain, and our language has changed to incorporate some of those shifts in the rhetoric. So in fact, a lot of the translation, I think, gets its roots from something similar happening here.
Yeah, the country has spoken.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great gifts was Boris Johnson talking in Burmese, when he wanted to read a road of Mandalay, didn't he? That was a great gift, because that happened while I was translating, and of course it's a sort of dreadful kind of fallback to some sort of very colonizing past, so it fitted perfectly the mood of the translation.
And as I'm following the newspapers in English-speaking countries, I noticed that the number of similarities is growing with every single month. Everyone is borrowing from the 70s, from the 30s, as if the language of the past was the only active layer of language. And it says something. For me, it is, a beginning of a diagnosis. We are influenced and maybe inflected by the past.
And in the case of this poem, that's the sort of Soviet and Marshall past, is it cultural past?
What strikes me maybe the most about this new, I wouldn't call it modern or even postmodern, this new past-obsessed sensibility, is that it doesn't see any difference. You can dig on any level of depth. You can borrow everywhere, because it is using history without remembering the roots or the dates or the meanings. It is, in fact, it's a way of colonizing history.
And particularly pressing at the moment in Britain, where we've got a completely false appropriation of history for political ends. So it's exactly, different worlds, but a very similar dynamic in the language. Well, I'm sure you've got questions. Let me open it up.
Thank you very much for the reading. Very powerful, very unique. I got a lot of very strong imagery. And what I wanted to ask about your relationship with some of the poets that we got in the beginning. For example, we had this evening about Tsvetaeva last week, and some of the way that you use sound, some of the sounds, it reminded me of the way that she breaks up words or repeats words. And it was really interesting what you were just talking about, this fragmentation of language and but to go back to some of these themes about dislocation and discomfort, so you didn't recognise your own city. And so it's like as if there's a kind of exile or alienation happening even within your own city without having to move anywhere. And I was wondering if any, I mean, I know you haven't had a chance to see the pavilion yet, but I think you know which poets are in there. And I was wondering if, when you were writing this, or at this time, 2015, any of this work, it reminded you of any of this work that they were writing in the 30s and 40s?
Thank you very much for the question. In fact, I was thinking about it today because, well, I'm honored to be a part of your wonderful project. Even more because, well, it gives me some ground for thinking about ways of memorizing, ways of paying our debts to the dead, and especially to the dead, exploited, displaced poets. Because poetry is not something stable, it is not something rigid. You cannot get away with just, putting a marble monument at the hugest city square, like the Triumphальная, this famous monument to Mayakovsky, that has nothing to do with the words he was using and meanings he was standing for. There is a small monument to Mandelstam in Moscow at Ivanovskaya Gorka. The nice thing about it is that it doesn't look as a monument. It is just a small yard with something written at the wall. But again, it is too stable to be lasting. But there is a way that poetry finds for itself to survive, and it is by reliving itself in someone else's quotations, in someone else's languages, in someone else's voices. In fact, that is what I've been trying to do with this poem, that borrows heavily on someone else's voices, that is quoting everything from T.S. Eliot to Mandelstam, from popular songs of the 30s to the posh rhetoric of late Soviet era. And that is what is brilliant in Sasha's translation, that is giving these familiar and unfamiliar spaces of Russian language, of Russian poetry, new corridors of meaning. It gives it its own place in the English language, and it is astounding how it works. For me, it's a living miracle. In fact, I'm going to say it. And I feel that, well, maybe what we've managed to do with this translation is, a kind of a homage to what you were trying to do with this project. And thanks for letting us be a part of it.
My question is related to the one that just been asked. Masha, I met you, I believe you were only 19 years old, and followed your poetry throughout. And now you grew so much. Your poetry is very strong, very original, very powerful. And I was wondering, who are your poetic parents, where you came from? Apart from being the voice of the language, obviously you had some poetic parents, or so to speak, influence, poetic influence from 18th, 19th, and 20th century. Would you reveal us?
I will try to, because, well, as you know, as they are putting it on Facebook, it is always complicated. Of course, the first name the first thing, as always, I guess every Russian poet would say the same. Of course, it's Mandelstam. Of course, speaking of your project and the 101st kilometer, of course, it's Mandelstam. But for me, maybe Vladimir Khlebnikov and his experience of working with the Russian language is also of crucial importance. And there is one more dimension that means a lot for me, an ethical dimension. And here, I guess Maria Stepanova is a leading influence. She is giving to the Russian poetry of the 20th century this ethical framework that is so distinctive, you can never forget about it. It gives us, well, in the time of post-truth, it is still very important even more important, to divide the black from the white. And she reminds us that black and white exists.
Where is it possible to read a poem in Russian?
Yeah.
There is this book that could be what on Azonro, but the poems are published. You can find them in the internet. Just put it down on Google, Maria Stepanova, Spoiler, or Война зверей и животных, and here it is.
We will be stocking books in the bookshop downstairs, but we weren't able to get them in time for the evening, but over the next few weeks. Yeah.
But
we're hoping so, yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Sasha, to tell something about the translations and how you were doing it, because it's miraculous work, and I really think that it is it's the most important thing that happened to this poem.
Well, what I can say about the translation is that we spent a month talking about it, and the plan was that we would work on it in May at Queen's College, and we'd sit and work, and I'd produce the translation. But of course, life is never like that. So I spent most of the month visiting Masha, who taught me through bits of the poem and talk about the references, and we'd sort of think about them. We had these lovely conversations, but then there were things to do. There was an exhibition to see at the Ashmolean. There was other conversations to have. There was sort of walking and going off and walking around the university parks and all these other delicious things to do. And so actually sitting down and translating didn't really happen. But in fact, that wasn't a disaster, because what was probably most important was talking to Masha about the poem, and also when we first started working, she quoted to me the words of another poet, Grigory Dashevsky, who said that he talked about the pre-textual body of a poem, so what exists behind the words. And because you can't begin to translate from the words, there's sort of almost like a sort of filter. It was very helpful to have that hint that Masha would be open to looking at what lay behind them and working out from that. And that was particularly important in the case of this poem, because as you will have heard, it's incredibly modernist in its structure. And I don't think it's by chance that it's actually modernist rather than postmodernist, because that is the beginning of the age that Masha's describing. And so it really helped to think I could tie some of the references back into British culture, or perhaps to sort of think about some of them you can't. Some of them you had to leave, and in some cases the images were so much more beautiful as just direct translations. They did, give things to English that didn't exist before, which is really always really lovely. But in other cases, like for example some of the songs, it was good to be able to draw on our own songs of war. So you might have heard that there's the home fires burning in there, and then there's other moments that come from First World War songs. And then there's other points like Kipling. There's a lot of Kipling in there, because Kipling seemed to be a fantastically Soviet tie-in, ironically. And then there's just things that, where I could find equivalents. I had to work out whether I wanted that or not, because sometimes equivalents aren't right. They're not right for the poem. They take it out of its world. And sometimes I felt they could add to it. I don't mean add to the poem. The poem is brilliant. It's a genius poem. But they could lend me a hand in the translation, I suppose. So there was a bit of that. And you will have heard that. For example, there's a point when Masha quotes Kuzmin, and it's a poem on the eve of a battle, a lover to a loved one. And I took a line from Antony and Cleopatra, or Antony and Cleopatra on the night before the battle, because what was essential about the quote was that it was a quote from pre-existing literature about the night before a battle. So it seemed fair enough to translate just that fact rather than the words of the quote. That's what I would say. Stephen.
Can I ask a question, maybe of both of you, but possibly more of Sasha? Thinking about the fracturing of language and sort of burying and digging up language, things like that. Not going backwards in time to which poets might have influenced you from past writing, but particularly Sasha from your work as editor at T. Can you think of contemporary poets, fairly contemporary poets, who are also dealing with their language, be it whatever language, in ways that are parallel to or paralleled by Maria's work with her language? I mean, I can think of one or two, that sort of intense fracturing through to maybe it would be allowed. It's not something that only exists going back in time, it's something that exists horizontally or going in the contemporary space we inhabit now, otherwise it couldn't be.
Well, the poet who often comes to mind, because I think she's really remarkable, is Dong-mi Choi, the Korean poet and translator, who lives in the States and translates Kim Hai-soon, and we published her a few times in NPT. And what's really interesting about Dong-mi is she didn't speak English until she was in her teens, and then she learned English. I think she said she failed English O-level, which she took. She's from Korea. She left Korea. Her father was a photojournalist, and he was forced out. And she then eventually came to the States, and her work is very, very political. And because she's not a native speaker of English, or she has another language as her mother tongue, her English is marked by that. And she said that what she saw as something shameful, I think she was very ashamed when she first failed her English O-level. She's come to see as a sort of strength in her language because she's got a sort of remove from English, and so she looks at it in a very cold light of a, and also there's a political dimension to that. She's in the States. South Korea is a colony of the States, a neo-colony, as she describes it. So her work is absolutely about how she comes from a country which is colonized by the language that she now speaks. So it's very, her poetry is very interesting in that respect. Is that?
This is, but to be honest, I have to think at times of Ziba Kabasi.
Absolutely, yes.
Sorry?
Ziba Kabasi, the Iranian poet who was in London, resident in London.
Especially the long poem that she wrote about the stoning to death of a young woman. It's a different matter, but the pressure on language that is exerted by the knowledge of that experience, to me, is paralleled by pressure on language that you're putting into your extraordinary poem, and the breakage of language that exists in both poems. That's why I was wanting to ask about other poets elsewhere.
Stephen translated Ziba Kabasi's poem about, I think it was an aunt who was stoned to death.
It was a second cousin.
Her second cousin. And the poem is in, I think it's in the Iranian issue, isn't it?
You did it?
Yes, yes. Yes, I'm sure.
Yes,
Is it possible to find it on the internet or somewhere? Because
Sure, it's online.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know your work very much.
Has some beautiful translations.
But I didn't want to bring, I didn't want to point to that. I wanted to point to it as an example of that fracturing that came through so strongly.
Absolutely. It is very important to find these points of similarity. Of course, it's all happening at the same time, and maybe, well, as Sasha was quoting Grigori Dostoevsky with his idea of, that preverbal body of a poem. And sometimes I'm thinking that, well, in fact, things we are doing are, different projections of one preverbal poetry from a huge body of work that is reflecting or being reflected from the walls of different languages. So
Great question. We have a question.
Well, I'm still trying to articulate it, but so it's continuing also with the question on the fracturing of language, and you mentioned that sort of that there is this combination of recent events happening in this country, or let's say world affairs in the last couple of years help you a lot with the translation, but at the same time you mentioned that there was certain concepts or language that was reminiscent of actually the past, of the 40, 50, 60 years ago. So I was wondering if have both of you found any correlation of that sort of language of the past that it is reflected nowadays, or are we living this is a unique time for language?
Well, I don't know what Sasha thinks about it, but I'm deeply sure that there is nothing unique about any time, with the exception of our own existence. And when I look back for 50 years or for 200 years or 2000, it doesn't really matter, because if you're looking closely enough, you can see that, as Karl Kraus was putting it, everything rhymes everything. Everything is a reflection of the other one, and you can take any line, any point, any image, and find these points of similarities. That is, well, that's what is so wonderful about being. You are always finding unexpected relatives everywhere. And when I was thinking about the possibilities of living in the times of fractured consciousness, fractured language, and the ways out of this situation, about seeing it as a challenge, I'm always thinking about what Anne Carson is doing. Her work is highly political. I would call it, well, activist, but she's deeply immersed in the political landscape of nowadays. And still she's working as a classical scholar. She is putting it into the huge context of otherness, and it gives every passing moment a fleeting quality that makes it at the same time modern and deeply I'm sorry for my clumsy English. I just arrived a few days ago, so I'm still struggling with it. what I wanted to say is you cannot be fully political without having in mind the puncture of immortality, the few moments you okay. Запуталась.
I'm trying to answer from a slightly different side while you. But I think what comes out at me from your question is the sort of politicization of the past that Masha was talking about, and the way that the past has become freighted with values that I don't hold. And I feel very angry about that because you feel as if you have as much right to the past as somebody else, but for some reason it's being co-opted into some battle between nostalgia and progressivism, which I can't honestly be part of. So it makes me feel quite angry. I genuinely feel very angry about it. And I thought it was quite interesting a couple of years ago, how many years? 3 years ago, when we looked back at the beginning of the First World War in Britain, and it turned out that it was still as political as it had been in 1914 or maybe in the 1920s. There was no let up in the politics of the First World War. I mean, it's 100 years ago, and yet the sort of discussions that people are having, historians were having about it, various revisionist histories versus traditional histories, showing me that actually it was like 3 years had passed since the First World War started. And I thought that was just really, really fascinating, that we don't actually seem to have moved on. We can't have a depoliticized history, I suppose. Well, that's obvious, but the active engagement with it. But it's so clear at the moment.
The roles of a poet in Russia and Ukraine are, or used to be, very different. Because, well, in Ukraine, poetry is a serious thing. In Russia, it is not, or it wasn't till the last maybe year, half a year. A huge poet like Sergei Zhadan, whose work is presented in this issue of NPT, can gather studios in Ukraine, as it used to be in the Soviet Russia, where hundreds or thousands of people were gathering or attending poetry readings. But what is interesting, there is something new about the Moscow poetry landscape. I was organizing a number of poetry events during the last 12 months. And the number of audiences are increasing, and increasing rapidly. The usual number of people attending a poetic reading is, as here in London as everywhere, it is from 30 to 50 persons, maybe more. You're lucky if it is 30 or 50, but well, in fact it starts with 10. And it is the same everywhere. So when the number of people coming over to listen to a poet, or the number of poets, were, well, for instance, 100 or 200 or even 5 at certain events, it has to mean something. And I have to say that, of course, it is wonderful and I feel happy about it. But there is also something threatening about it. Osip Mandelstam used to say once about Anna Akhmatova that her poetry is like a seagull who is coming over the battlefield looking for some fresh meat. And it is a strange metaphor, right? I've never heard about the seagulls coming over to the battlefield. It is, my guess is he was meaning a crow, but he didn't want to put it that straightforward. but that's what he meant. And it is not a flattering metaphor also. Because, well, a crow at a battlefield eating corpses, well.
You can read the poem in MP3.
Yeah, buy a copy. They're on sale.